Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today. That's completely forgot how I start videos here. It seems we got the fish off today, which I actually completely forgot about. We'll be participating in one round of that and then continuing about a day. But yeah, what do I want to talk about today? I actually have, this is like a pre-prepared topic, sort of. What I want to talk about, well, I don't really want to talk about it because it's still a really recent movie, but yesterday I went to go see A Quiet Place Part 2 with some of my buddies, of course, in the theatres. Now they're starting to open it up again, which is, you know, nice, I suppose. Hello everyone, right now in Fawnhallow, it's 1:59 PM on Saturday, July 10th, 2021. The summer fishing tourney runs until 6 PM today. Get started in the plaza. That's all for today, have a fun day out there. Yeah, and A Quiet Place 2 is pretty good, is what I'd say. I think I actually like it more than the first Quiet Place, which is, it's an interesting thing, but I think it made me like the first Quiet Place more than I did, because I think I talked a little bit about this yesterday. I think A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 does have plot holes, you know, and part of it is, like, it has its faults, is what I'll say. Hold on. Hello, Vitamin D. I got a little present for you. It's nothing too extravagant, but I think it's just a thing. Add a stylish new eyewear to your regular ensemble. Okay, we got this on a lot. Yeah, but there are certainly plot holes in both A Quiet Place 1 and A Quiet Place 2, but I think, you know, in retrospect, they're not that big a deal. In fact, like, there are definitely times in movies where plot holes are a big deal, and them existing in the movie can be very detrimental. Wait, can we even give presents out on a fishing tourney day? We might not be able to until after 6 p.m. Ah, I forgot there was a shooting star event yesterday. Oh, to be fair, then I got him quite late, so there's no surprise there. Yeah, I think plot holes can certainly detract from a movie, and I'm definitely not going to argue in favour for plot holes. Plot holes especially are just like, they can be extremely distracting if they are straight up nonsensical. They can ruin a movie, ruin a character development, that sort of thing. And I think mainly the plot holes in Quiet Place 1 and Quiet Place 2 can sort of boil down to two things. One of them being the monsters are a little inconsistent with what they can hear and how they react to things. Of course, with the main cast, sometimes they sort of like, I mean, you see them normally in the scenes, just like, as soon as they hear a sound, they like beeline straight for it at like Mach 10 or whatever. Okay, that's a bit fast, but they just beeline straight for it, just like with no regard to anything in its wake, and just like absolutely destroying everything that could be in its path as it goes there. And then also, sometimes they just, when they hear a sound, or they think they hear a sound, they just sort of very slowly like limber across the hallway to that sort of thing, just like as if they're like very cautiously sniffing out the thing instead of being like ferociously attacking it. So it's a little bit inconsistent there sometimes, and especially it happens a lot with the main characters, where the main characters will, of course, they got plot armor until they don't have plot armor, I suppose, and they actually want the director, John Krasinski, and I don't know how you say his name actually, wants him to get injured. And it's, by the way, it's not knocking John, because I think he's directed and written two phenomenal movies, and it's a rare case where I actually think the sequel is as good or perhaps even better than the first movie, which is not common. Apparently everyone loves that fishing spot, so I just sort of leave him to it. And I'm also want to back up by the fact I'm not a movie critic, so I'm not really in the place to criticise a movie. You know, Cododo Bella, absolutely not. But these are just my thoughts on it, and you know, to fill up half an hour, you kind of got to talk about everything, and I can't just talk continuously about the good things about a movie for a whole half an hour. Just get the bad stuff out of the way, and then we can relish about all the good things. But yeah, that's a number one thing, I think, or maybe number two thing, which bothered me kind of about the movie, is sometimes the monsters attacking consistently, and that was especially the case in the first movie. I'm trying to think how to not spoil it. It's an old movie, it's like 2 years old, but still. In a scene where one of the main characters grabs Nax, and then immediately after that, I feel like it's a little nonsensical for the creature to attack at that point, but you can sort of write it off, a lot of them being like, when they hear things that they shouldn't necessarily be able to hear, them being like using their active super hearing mode, and then when they don't hear things which they definitely should hear, it's sort of being like, maybe it's being muffled out by ambient noise. So you can sort of just write it off a little bit, but I guess the way it was presented when I was watching it, made me go, this feels a bit weird. And, you know, not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but afterwards, that the movie would make sense if you think about it, but it's sort of like in the moment it's just a bit weird if you had to, if that's the way you interpret it, which you could ask. There's an argument to be made there, being like, oh, you know, there's something perhaps better that they could have done to direct it better, but, you know, there's choices made both for, like, artistic and budget reasons and creative decisions and all sorts of different things, so we never know the full story, so really, there's not really much to talk about. But the thing that not annoyed me, it's a bit of a harsh word, but thing that's, like, irked me a little bit was, I feel like a lot of a movie, you know, is centered around these moments where they have to have, like, a loud sound or whatever, causing a situation, and then it goes into, like, a set piece of being like, oh, this is now, like, a high tense moment where eventual, like, payoff a jump scare sort of thing, or other things going on like that. Perfectly fine. But I feel like a lot of them get set up because the characters make really bad decisions. Not all the time. A lot of the time they're actually quite clever, I think, and a lot of them are quite resourceful and that sort of thing. But sometimes some of them are really, like, carried by very strange decisions, which it's not, like, people make mistakes and that sort of thing, that's perfectly fine, but the thing is, I guess the characters a lot of the time are pretty reasonable, and, like, they shouldn't have been pretty resourceful, and then with the stuff they have in Apocalypse, and they've really thought things through, because they put, like, a lot of small details in to really try and emphasize that. But then I guess it's the fact that seeing them then do a really strangely bad decision just kind of makes me go, huh? Why do they do that? Like, an example is, like, right at the start of the first movie, I'm not going to spoil it, but that opening scene, you know, with the rocket ship, if you've seen it, my sort of thing is, like, why do the parents, like, not continuously watch their children all the time, I suppose? But the kid is, like, the youngest kid is, like, 4 years old, and, you know, kids, pretty noisy, kids, pretty, like, don't care for their own safety all that much, not, like, on purpose, but they kind of haven't, like, clocked the gravity of a lot of situations yet. I feel like if I was a parent, I'd be like, this kid is never leaving my sight unless for more than, like, 10 seconds maybe at a time, because you basically never know what's going to happen in doubly so in an apocalypse situation. But, you know, that I think, you know, things like that you can not sweep it under a rug, but just, like, brush it off, because it's basically like, okay, they just had a lapse in judgment at the time, you know, they're tired, being in an apocalypse really does wear down on them, and that sort of thing, which makes it, you know, you just go, okay, fair enough, you know, but I guess it was kind of, like, redeemed for me in the second movie, because they talked about it, where the mother was just going, like, my hands were empty, I could have just held him, but I just was so tired and that sort of thing. So, you know, it's sort of like lampshading, being like, they realised they made a mistake, basically, and that if they just did something slightly differently, if they just like could muster up a tiny bit more energy, then things could have gone differently, but alas they didn't. Oh, I was like, what's the conversation? This because we haven't talked to Raymond for a while. Sorry, let me have a sip of water. But yeah, what else did I want to say? Yeah, but they do make surprisingly bad decisions. Like, there's a decision the son makes in the second movie, which makes me go, It's not like it's unreasonable, but it does seem a little strange, I suppose. If you wonder what I'm talking about the scene where he takes binoculars, I suppose, and it causes, like, the second set piece. Or maybe it's a first set piece of the movie, I can't remember, which, by the way, is definitely my favourite, because if you just look at it in isolation, don't think too much about the causes of a lead up to the event, where if you think about it too hard, you're just sort of like, this doesn't really make all that much sense. But the actual set piece itself, with the dock scene combined with oxygen plus binocular scene, is really cool, and very tense and very atmospheric, I suppose. But the younger kid's decision, I suppose, like, you can say, I'm going to do my best to tread carefully around spoilers if you haven't seen it, his decision was definitely a place made out of concern and fear, and I suppose you could argue a little bit of irrationality because he's still kind of young. I don't know how old he's meant to be in the movie, but I guess he's somewhere over 12 to 14 years. Maybe even younger, I don't know. At least that's the impression what I got from the first movie. He looked to me to be like 12-ish or so. But I will say in the second movie he definitely looks older. He looks like 15 or so, which is fair enough because, you know, kids age. What can you do about it? Not much, really. But yeah, it's a decision made out of fear, but it's an incredibly irrational decision, because even one made out of fear and the predicament he's in, I feel like a lot of kids, even at his age, would not do necessarily what he did. Or at least not go to the extent that he did. Sorry, this probably sounds very confusing if you've seen it and you're trying to think about what I'm describing, but it probably sounds confusing if you hadn't seen it as well. But that's kind of a point, so I don't spoil anything. But, you know, fair enough. It's because, like, for there to be tense moments and atmospheric things to happen, you kind of need accidents to happen, like bad decisions to lead into events where, like, noise happens and then people just go, wow, scary situation and that sort of thing. Because I guess it would be rather boring to see if the family were just perfect the entire time. And hold on, I didn't pay attention to what bug that was. What bug is this? Jewel beetle. That's the ground one, I think. Oh, grasshopper, catch this. Yeah, so you need these sort of like imperfect moments for it to really lead into much more frightening situations, but some of them just sort of go like meh. Some of them, I guess the way I'd put it is some of them don't land quite right with me. Some of them do. They seem reasonable, and like I could totally see why that would happen. Like in the first movie with the silo and the two kids, and I could see that happening. It was you know, just a pure accident, because it was where they sort of like disregarded maybe their surroundings a little bit and careful stuff, because they're having a much more like emotional argument, I suppose, between the two. Completely fair, you know. It seems completely reasonable. Why does this grasshopper jump so weirdly? You know what it looks like? It looks like the grasshopper robot from that old Mario Party 6 minigame or whatever. The insect one where you had to choose one of 4 different insect cars to reach your end goal. You know what I'm talking about? There was a grasshopper, a snail, a ladybird, and a beetle? I can't remember. It's been a while, but I think it was like the grasshopper was just way stronger than all the others. I don't know. One of them was way stronger, or maybe it was a beetle. The beetle was way stronger than it was a grasshopper. The snail sucks, and the ladybird's okay. Is what I recall. But I don't really remember, so don't quote me on that. I just want a bug. I really, really, really want a bug. If you want to be my bug. I don't know what his parody is. Don't ask me. What other look around missions do we got? Chop wood. Hot item, fish, fruits. Sure, can do. But yeah, I thought it was a really good movie. So on to the good things about it. They have 2 major scenes, I suppose, in it where because spoilers, the characters split up in the situation, and there's 2 distinct scenes where, I'm going to call them set pieces, I suppose, where simultaneous things are going on and the sounds basically like link into each other and everything sort of syncs up really nicely. It's so super cool. It's super cinematic, it's super atmospheric, and the payoff is fantastic. I guess mild spoilers in the first set piece, which I'm going to call the dock scene, I suppose. It's the same scene as the binocular scene, I suppose. It's really cool, to be honest. I really like how it links in the mother scene to the daughter scene at the dock, with... It's really hard to be ambiguous, so just, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, maybe don't listen to what I'm saying. With the fire being caused. And it's so seamless, and I like how you can follow the exact thought process of a character's, especially the mother, as she formulates her plan. You know, as she looks at the sprinkler, and then, you know, what she's carrying, and she's like, I got an idea, this is how I'm going to work around it. And then, like, as she slowly looks up after she causes a fire, being like, I really hope the sprinkler works and still turns on. And then it does. And that payoff. I like the tension and the panic. Like, I've read reviews and stuff online because I like to read discussion of these sort of things afterwards, because who doesn't? It's fun to see what other people think, and, you know, you can see if other people picked up on small details or stuff that you didn't necessarily. Some people very overly critical, I think, on movie, but perhaps, you know, they're being the actual critics of that sort of thing, so they've got a place to stand from it. But, you know, is that actually true? Who knows? It's the real question I have there. But still, yeah, I mean, that just goes like, don't read necessarily negative internet comments if you don't want to engage in the negativity, I suppose, in the first place. So that's sort of, you know, something that's easy to forget. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to think what I was saying. The movie utilises the storytelling technique of Chekhov's gun quite a lot, to be honest, actually. There's a scene in, like, the intro, the prologue, my word, that cicada model's huge. In the intro with, how can I not give this away? A hand motion, I suppose, which we don't have a wooden plank zone, which gets utilised later on in the dock scene, which is super cool. That one was kind of obvious, like, when you saw it, because it was, like, a lot of attention was brought to it when it happened, which kind of made it feel like, you know, at least when I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, this is obviously going to be something which is definitely going to be relevant later on, because, I mean, so much attention was brought to it, and also, like, the word choice was a bit strange compared to usual. You would have expected a word slide instead of what was used, but still perfectly fine, like, who really cares? And then when it actually happened again, I thought it was a really nice moment. Sorry, I don't know why I pulled out fish. Okay, so, spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the movie, stop watching this episode now, because I can't dance around the scenes with spoiler warnings any longer. So, you know, fair enough. You've had a 20-minute episode of Animal Crossing today. Thank you for watching, I suppose, and hope we see each other again. Bye bye for now. Okay, now, if you have seen the movie, or I guess you don't mind being spoiled on it, what am I doing? I don't have to fish anymore. I'm talking about where Emmett goes dive to Regan. Basically, of course, it's very foreshadowed in the beginning, where he's just like, dive, dive, dive. So, hey, how do you say dive? Diving is a bit of a strange word to use in baseball there, I think, in that context. I think you'd probably use slide for the base, and diving is more for catching a ball, if I understand correctly. But, you know, that's just a minor detail. I feel like probably because they wanted to definitely use the word dive, because you can't use slide off a dock into the water. That doesn't really get the point across. But, you know, if you had him, like, diving for a ball, it probably doesn't lead well into... what's the boy's name? I forgot what the boy's name is. The younger son, you know, also being on the same team, about to hit the ball with a baseball bat, which is probably what they wanted. And also, you know, excuse me, a lot of people can extrapolate, even if they don't know baseball terms, that, you know, diving there probably meant for the base that he was just about to run to. But even if you don't get it, then it's fine. It's not a big deal. But I thought it was a nice callback. But also, you know, a friend brought up a point that he didn't find it very interesting, because it was just like, it was so, I'm not sure how to phrase it, it was so premeditated, I suppose, or like, it is just what it is. It's like, they didn't do any sort of like interesting techniques or symbolism, maybe not symbolism, but there's nothing creative about it. It was just like, oh, he, you know, if you didn't have the callback in the first place, if you didn't have a prologue, it would just be like, oh, that would just be the plan he came up with, like, telling her to dive in water, and the motion, the hand sign for dive is pretty, like, guessable. Like, he'd probably still make that sort of motion, even if he didn't know what it was in the first place. And to an extent, I do somewhat agree. I don't think I fully agree, because then he also didn't like the callback of the breathing motif, but I feel like, yeah, it is a very basic callback. And you can argue that certainly he would be able to guess the diving motion for that sort of thing, and it doesn't really add much to it. But I think it's more representative of what it is, because well, the whole point of for whole their journey from when he caught up with Regan and was trying to bring up back is obviously he doesn't know sign language. He knows like basically none of it, and the difficulty that he has with communicating with her, where he basically has to sort of like over enunciate and do very grand dramatic actions to communicate with her, and it really focus on the fact that they had to be next to each other and he had to very much enunciate for them to probably get the message across. And then this is the first point where he like fluently, I suppose, even though it's just one word, but that's still a lot for someone who doesn't know sign language, communicates with her, showing that he remembers exactly the lesson that she taught him, like way back when. And it's of course from that fateful day when the apocalypse happened and he lost, I believe, his son or someone else, I can't remember, which is showing that even though he doesn't want to remember that sort of thing, and he's doing his best to forget about that day and how much he's cut off from it, that now he's, I guess maybe I'm over, I think certainly the meaning there of him being actually able to communicate with Regan now is definitely an important one, and maybe I'm reading a bit much into it when saying it's sort of like not him accepting the past so much, but not him just completely shutting it out, not shutting it out from his memory, but like I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Sorry, I'm not an English lit student. We'll get Ned on here. He can do that analysis of it much better than I could. But it's sort of just like him embracing it again, I suppose. Using through a practical lens rather than necessarily one that he'd much rather forget. But yeah, I think it basically what it does is sort of like reinforces the connection the two have now built up, because it's a short movie, to be fair, like 1 minute 30ish or so. You don't have a lot of time to do a lot of exposition, which I really appreciate the movie for doing, is that they don't have the characters doing a lot of exposition on screen. It's very minimal. Like for example, when Regan is explaining, she only explains, the plan is only explained once ever in the movie, which is fantastic. Like you don't have to show the character explaining it to every single character. Like Regan explains it to her. I should look up what the brother's called. It's not Max. It's let's see, Marcus. That's it. Where Regan explains her plan to Marcus about radio tower is only explained once, and then it's implied that Marcus told the mother, Evelyn, and he told Emmett, the family friend, about what the plan was. So it's assumed that they're all on board and know what's going on. So then, you know, when Emmett catches up with Regan, he doesn't have to go like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" You know, it's both the movie and the audience knows that character already knows, because he would have had it explained to him. So it's no surprise that he goes like and finds a boat the next day and that sort of thing, which is nice. It doesn't waste time with that sort of thing. But because I have 3 different stories going on, it's quite hard to balance, I suppose, the amount of character development for all that sort of thing. So just through that small scene of him just being like divers, showing, I think it's meant to be representative of a connection developing in some forms, where he is now protecting her in some aspect of, maybe you can argue, feeling a sort of a fatherly figure in life after she lost hers. Now that might be a bit, I might be reading a lot more into that, but as I always say, art is a two-way street anyway. It's about not only how you interpret it, but also how the director has an interpretation. They have a vision. They have something that they want to give off to you, but you know, that's only half of the thing. Half of it is you watching it and coming up with your own conclusions of what things represent and what meaning it has to you. And if you see part of it, and the director definitely has like some symbolism that they've been intending, but you don't see that symbolism, like, or you don't think it's interesting, just like, you know, my friend, fair enough, you know, that part of the movie has no bearing on you, and has no significance and no depth. But if you're someone like me, I suppose, who perhaps maybe overanalyzed it and maybe looked into it too much to see what it represented, it gives it even more meaning towards you. And they're both equally valid points. I think that's the whole point of art, is not necessarily, like, you know, dependent on the person. It's not necessarily to be the most show the most technical skill in whatever, which definitely is a component of art, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't necessarily, that's more like a objective quote way of showcasing art, meaning of art, when really art is really subjective and fast-paced, and a lot of it should be derived through the meaning that you derive from it, rather than necessarily the technical skill which is on display. Because even you might be able to see an art piece which perhaps the person who painted it or whatever was like an amateur, though they did it when they were still learning, that sort of thing, but maybe you can derive a lot more meaning from it because of it's very representative of something in your life. Like, I don't know, perhaps just an example, but like perhaps you lost a family member very dear to you or something, but they like loved bluebirds and that sort of thing, and then you see like a painting like of a bluebird flying out the window or something like that. Even if it's by an amateur painter, you can derive a lot of meaning from that, being like, oh, it's representative of that person, you know. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. A little bit overly top flowery language. Flowery. So I just got a phone notification. I was just thinking if it's important, but it's not. So I'll leave that for later. So yeah, and I mean, you might feel like a bit of a cop-out answer, being like, oh, you know what? In art, there's no wrong answers, and you know, I do believe that. Not even to an extent, I just do believe that. Art is very subjective and everything, and a lot of it is I say it all the time, it's about the relationship of how the creator intended meaning that they intended to give out and the meaning that you derive from it. They both add up together to create your experience of it, which is essentially what matters in the end. And then by sharing your experience of it with other people, you can gain different insights. So, you know, be like, oh, from this scene, I interpreted it this way, or be like, oh, I interpreted it this way. You can both gain like a deeper understanding of it, and you don't have to necessarily like think the same way the other person does. You don't have to hear their part and be like, oh yeah, you know, that seems like objectively right or whatever. You can still be like, okay, yeah, I see why you would think that. I still like my interpretation better. That's both fine, because you just you're only adding. I don't get how it can subtract, to quote that. And I don't know who on earth said that. It's the thing about a conversation between like a scientist and an artist, or what sort of thing. The artist goes like, oh, you can't appreciate like this flower because I can appreciate its beauty and the colour and the nature's gift of that sort of thing, but you come at it as a scientist from a purely logical perspective. Your meaning, you derive less meaning from it. And the scientist goes on a tangent being like, oh no, excuse me, I can, even if I'm coming at it from a scientific or logical perspective, I can still appreciate like the beauty and how in its workings, and how life is born, and how it spreads its seeds and germinates new life, and the structure of its petals and its leaves, and how the Fibonacci numbers and stuff like that create patterns in nature. And then at the end he storms off being like, I don't get how it can subtract, it can only add. And you know, I think that's exactly the sort of motivation you should go by. Like learning about other people's perspectives and interpretations of it. Of course, you know, you can go to a logic extreme, or what if someone just like makes up a trolly like horribly offensive sort of interpretation or something which is clearly not there in the first place. Then you could be like, okay, well, I mean, I guess it's adding 0 in this case, but it's not really subtracting anything, is it? It's not like listening to it like robbed you of your own interpretation or anything like that, I suppose, is really my point. So yeah, basically in the end, all interpretations are equally valid. I don't know if we have a walking leaf model, so let's catch one just in case. Yeah, basically TLDR, I liked A Quiet Place 2. The scenes and the way they set things up was very nice. You might say it's a bit direct with how it, there's not too much subtlety. Oh, for a subtlety, it was so subtle that it went over my head, which is fair enough, it probably did. With how it like showed things off, like the amount of close-ups they had on the furthest door, like locking with a towel. It was so obvious that the towel was going to get removed at some point, and then someone was going to get locked in, and then Marcus did that accidentally. Sort of like the writing was on the wall, and the amount of like just breathe things going on, and like the focus on the baby monitor and the oxygen that they had left. I think we have a diving beetle. You would see it and be like, okay, yeah, obviously something about this is definitely going to happen soon. But I don't think that takes away from it, is my argument. As they say, it can only add. Ooh, hold on a minute. We've got some glasses in there. They all add together and it's all very nice. Do I think it's a perfect movie? No. Okay, let's not be completely ridiculous. Is it my favourite movie in the world? No, it's not. But it's very, very enjoyable and it's very much worth a watch. And I would put it in the category of movies I would watch twice. And that's not very many, to be honest. And it's also not many genres. Like, certain genres of movies don't really lend well to that. And, like, I suppose detective sort of movies and novels of that sort of thing might not necessarily lend well to it. Actually, no, they kind of do, because then you can kind of see all the foreshadowing. But yeah, it's just an enjoyable experience, and if you find yourself being overly critical of it to the extent that you can't enjoy it anymore, then just, you know, fair enough if you don't enjoy it in the first place. I don't think we have a war for each other, so let's keep this. Fair enough if you don't enjoy it, but, like, things tend to be a lot more enjoyable if you don't have to come at it everything from, like, you don't have to prime yourself for an overly critical point of view and get ready to point out the flaws of it, like your cinnamon sins or that sort of thing. Be more like Cinema Wins, where you just, like, appreciate the things you like in it, and if it's not that many, fair enough. It was just not the movie for you, and it was, you could argue, a bad movie, but I know you'd have a harder time arguing objectively unless it's something truly terrible. But still, if you have been watching, let's round this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscriptions, shares are greatly appreciated. Join me Dear Darling Discord and follow me on Twitter down below. I hope we can see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.